Hello everyone, this is Ronnie. In this video, I want to talk about how when you're starting a new habit, like you've changed your diet, there is an almost predictable roller coaster of emotions that you will go through in the initial stages of changing your diet, changing your habits. It's completely normal, it's totally human, it's completely programmed within us. And if you are aware of it, you're more likely to persevere through it, I suppose. The reason that I'm bringing this up is that recently I've been creating some new habits, and one of them is exercise. So I've been exercising more. But this month I decided to do a bit of a challenge where I essentially doubled the amount of exercise I was doing. And today was the third day of that. And I actually felt something that you often feel, that you will feel, that we all feel when we change habits, especially for some reason the third or fourth day into it. And that is a feeling of dread, an absolute feeling of dread. Um, it's hard to put into words, but probably if you put it into words, then dread is the best word. You dread doing it. You have almost no enthusiasm to do it. You're looking to avoid it. You're trying to stop yourself from doing it. I mean, maybe I even felt that in the second day. Is this the fourth day? I'm trying to remember. So maybe this is the fourth day, but third or fourth day. First day, tremendous enthusiasm. Or you've probably had tremendous enthusiasm, then you're starting the first day. Second day, enthusiasm is dropped, but often you can maybe keep going. But third, fourth day, dread, a feeling of dread. And it's just an emotion thing. It's a chemical thing. So a friend of mine used to say that to a guy. He had like a drug addict who lived near him, and the guy would become suicidal and stuff because he'd been taking whatever drugs, and then he would come down off the drug. And when you're coming down off the drug, your brain is depleted of like all the positive chemicals and stuff. So that happened. And then this guy would be freaking out and paranoid and all this stuff. And my friend would sit with him and just say, it's just the chemicals in your brain. This isn't a state that's going to last forever. This is just a temporary, thing. And that's what it is. It's like a biochemical, naturally programmed reaction to your endeavor to change habit. You are programmed to not change habits, to not change diet. That's why it's so difficult to change diet. And a lot of people have an experience of like they develop some enthusiasm, they go raw for 7 days, a week, 2 weeks, and all that kind of stuff. But it's not real. They're living on willpower and enthusiasm, and in the back of their mind, they're not really committed to it yet. They kind of know they're going to go back on some level. And and habits and addictions and cravings are very difficult to change. But everyone tends to experience these emotions. Um, and it's funny, it can be an emotion of dread, but it can also be an emotion of like, this doesn't matter. Why even bother doing this? You know, um, complete confusion. All these different emotions you can go through in your journey to changing your diet. That's why it's good to have support. That's why it's maybe good to have a coach if you're struggling with it. That's why it's good to have a group of other people doing it with you, because that'll really push you through that. In fact, other people is probably the best thing you can have, whether it's one, whether it's a group. Excellent if it's a group or a community or whatever. Fruit Festival. Fruit Festival's a pretty good one. So, with all that in mind, how do you get through that? It's very difficult. You have to almost be slightly outside of yourself. And just like my friend, just tell yourself this is just some emotions that I'm going through. This is just some emotional stuff that comes up that's trying to kind of test me to see if I really want to do this. You know. Now, does that make sense? Does that make sense to you? I'd love to see your comments below. But it will happen almost every time you try and create and change a new habit. It could be as simple as I'm going to start meditating for 15 seconds a day. By the third day, you'll be trying to avoid it quite often. That's why it's good when you're changing habits. I'm a bit of a master at changing habits, I like to think. I'm a bit of a master, or I'm heading towards mastery of changing habits. And the thing that I've learned is that momentum and habits are better than willpower and discipline. That's an absolute for sure. And the more extreme you try and change your habit, the more difficult it'll be for you to sustain that. Therefore, it's better for you to change habits very slowly, gradually, but consistently keep on changing, I think. So if your goal is to meditate for 20 minutes a day, and I did this years ago when I started meditating, for example, I probably started with a minute a day or something. I can't remember, it was a minute or like 2 minutes, or maybe it was 5 minutes, but I started with a very small number. And every couple of weeks, not every day, not every week, but every couple of weeks, I went up a minute. Or maybe I just went up 30 seconds. And I just gradually went up and up and up to the point that I was doing like, at one point I think like 45 minutes a day. Now, at a time now, I fell out of that habit, unfortunately. But I'm kind of back into the swing of it a little bit. But for a long time, I was out. That used to be a solid daily habit. But what you find is like good habits, you have to consistently. You can't stop it and you go back to it so easily. You have to choose it and keep it going. But it obviously becomes easier if it's a habit. If you've actually formed a habit, you know. But that's why it's maybe easier for someone to start with eating an apple a day for a couple of weeks, and then start with have fruit in the first thing in the morning, and then eventually have fruit for breakfast, and then have fruit for breakfast, and eventually have it for lunch as well. And when you do that, when you fall off your path, you don't go right back to the beginning. And there's so many people that they're, unfortunately, junk food, and they want to jump to raw, and that's fine. But they go 100% raw overnight. You know, there's not that many people that sustain that long term. Because we're actually programmed to fail to do that. So they will, what am I trying to say now? They'll go from all the food to 100% raw. And some people can last doing that a while, you know. The problem is if they have a bad day and they fall off the path, they go right back to the start. And they go right back to a diet where they're going back to causing the damage that they were trying to reverse. Whereas if they'd taken a staircase, they're only going to fall one step down the staircase. I suppose I'm at a place where I know what's the worst thing I would eat right now in a way. Probably like nutritional yeast, something like that with defrosted sweet corn or something like that is probably the worst thing I would eat right now. Um, with avocados added to it, with like lots of fat added to it, or something like that, right? And I don't eat that. Like if I've eaten enough and everything, I have enough fruit. I don't really crave anything like that. But if I was in that moment and I got hungry like that, I could end up having something like that, which I don't really like to do, but I've I've done once in a while, you know. Um, and it doesn't make me feel particularly bad. It's not particularly bad for me. It's just that I I just always know like there's always a difference with eating like a mostly fruit based diet, you know, without having things like that. Um, my fall down is not right back to completely cooked food. It's not back to potatoes. It's not like, oh well, if I had a bad day, I'll have potatoes. I if I have the worst day, I'm not going to eat potatoes. I could eat potatoes by complete mistake. Like, um, I don't know, I had a really vulnerable moment or something, and I hadn't been eating, and I was out. Like maybe there's a possibility that I would. I'm not. So I'm not going to say I'm totally infallible, right? But um, in general, my worst day would not be eating potatoes. It would not be vegan pizza. Like I wouldn't go back to that. You know, on it's just not even in my mentality to eat that. I don't get cravings for that. You know, even talking about it now, I just realize like I even think and talk about these things so little that I just don't get these cravings or even think about them. You know, a friend of mine was saying he still thinks about cooked food quite a lot, and I'm like, you probably need to eat more. like, if you're really if you've been raw vegan for years and you're still thinking about cooked food, like you're not eating enough. It's the classic kind of Doug Graham thing. Like if you're craving starches, you're not eating enough fruit, and it's so right a lot of the time. As soon as you eat fruit, you don't even think about eating the starches, you know. So so what are we talking about? I go off in these tangents, start talking about people, and lose track of the video. Yeah, so habits. I would much rather if I was coaching someone or teaching them, I'd much rather they said I'm gonna have fruit for breakfast from now on, and they they stick to that, and they stick consistently to that. Because if they stick consistently to that, at least that make it going to make a benefit to them for life. If they go 100% raw for a couple of weeks or whatever, if they just go back to what they were doing after that, it's no point. So I mean, it'll have some benefit, but not a huge benefit. It's really your habits that form your health, and and once you can get someone fruit for breakfast, then you can maybe get fruit for lunch. At this point, they're going to start to feel a tension of how much different the first half of their day feels to the second half of their day when they have the cooked food. And if you have any desire to feel better, fruit's going to win that battle. So you're going to feel a tension like I need to do something about this. They're either going to go back, they might go backwards, but if you've really formed a habit of eating fruit for breakfast, fruit for lunch, you're going to want to go forwards and eventually have fruit and salad for dinner or just fruit for dinner. So I mean I really like that method. I don't see many people do 100% raw overnight because we are so programmed to fail. Biologically, whatever you want to call it, neurochemistry, emotionally. So my message to all of you is that these emotions that you feel are not a result of parasites, stuff in your guts, your negative upbringing, your history of eating problems or whatever, um, toxic emotional stuff, your lack of self love. It's nothing to do with any of that. We're all in a battle with our old self when we're trying to create our new self. We're trying to move on and we get tested now to see if we really want to do that. Now, why would this happen? Why would we be programmed like this? That doesn't make sense. It makes total sense when you consider evolutionary history of not just human beings, but animals. So animals, like humans, a lot of animals at least, are very habitual creatures, creatures of habit. We create habits that work for us, and we create skills that become habits in a way that work for us. And what happens is when we do something over and over and over and over and over and over, it gets programmed in deep in our subconscious, and all of a sudden, we use very little energy to do it. When you start a new skill, it takes a tremendous amount of energy, especially mentally, brain work, to be doing this new skill, to be learning it. Eventually, it gets chunked down into like a smaller kind of thing. That's not a great way of saying it, but it becomes, it takes less energy. The more that you've created those circuits in your brain, the more those circuits, fire faster, I suppose. Therefore, it's much easier to do it. There's less resistance to it, literally, kind of literally. So you can do these things more easily. And that's why, like, you're driving a car, when you first learn to drive a car, you have to really focus on it. And when you come off the road, you're like sweating almost with the amount of focus you had to put into it. And a couple of years down the line, people are on their phone, they're talking to someone, they're looking somewhere, then they're just automatically driving and swerving around things and all the rest of it, right? Well, it's the same as creating habits with your diet. When you start off, you're going to put a lot of time and energy and effort and thought process into it. Eventually, hopefully, it becomes a habit for you and it becomes easy. And that's when we say, oh, this lifestyle's really easy. How come other people can't do it? Because they're having to put so much energy and effort and thought into it. And so we try and help by providing all the information so you don't have to think so much, trying to make it easier, but still you're whenever you do something new, it's a lot of thought that goes into it. So, what can you say? What can you say? Just be aware of it. Just be aware of these things happening. You're never going to create a better version of yourself or improve your life if you can't create new habits. And you have to kind of grind through these emotional roller coasters that happen all the time. Be aware of them, understand your psychology, and essentially, why does this happen? Because according to some people, according to Doug Lyle and Alan Goldhammer, they have a book called The Pleasure Trap, but they say that the animals are really looking to go towards pleasure, avoid pain, and also avoid unnecessary, and trying to conserve energy, basically. So we're trying to avoid using up more energy than we need to. One big source of excess energy use is creating new pathways in the brain. And when we start doing new activities and changing our activities, our brain has to change the pathways and create new pathways. And when we create a new pathway at first, and we try and do this thing, if it's a skill or a habit or whatever, it's very difficult. It takes a lot of effort. it's like it's a very, you know, not a very fluent message that's being created. I've not got the right words for this, but um, I'm trying to think of a good analogy, like like a big blocked up pipe, and there's like and you have to push all this water through to get this little bit through. But as that breaks, as you use it, it breaks down over time. It breaks down over time, and it becomes wider and stronger. And all of a sudden, all this water can just gush through, which is sort of what I'm trying to sort of. I think that makes sense to some degree. Um, so it becomes easier and easier as the neural pathways become more used up, and the messages are flowing through those neural pathways quicker and easier, you know. Um, and then things start to become automatic and easy, right? But that takes tremendous energy. Well, maybe not tremendous, but it takes enough energy that your body doesn't want you to be doing that all the time. Because in our ancestral past, we didn't always have food. We didn't always have enough food. We couldn't always find enough food. And we're always trying to conserve energy anyway. So the members of our species that conserved energy more were more likely to survive in times when they needed energy and they didn't have food, or they had less food. The ones that used up all their energy were less likely to mate because they didn't have any energy to, less likely to, you know, even be able to get food, um, less likely maybe to be able to run away from attackers and stuff like that. So they're more likely. So conserving energy is like a huge part of survival among animals. So animals are always looking to conserve energy, and there's a few things that are so important, are more important than that. But it's a big principle about how we act. So because that's programmed in everyone in our species, I kind of know when I'm talking to people, I know if they're really on the path of really creating new habits and changing their diet and all that stuff, if they're really ready to do that. By what they do, the way they're approaching it, the way they're talking about it, I can see that and sense that. You know, I can also see when people are kind of faking it or they're not really there yet. They think they are and they feel they are, but you can tell they're not quite at that place. Now, what does this all mean to you? It's just awareness about it. And it just means you keep going through it. But don't take it as a bad sign. Don't take it as your subconscious is telling you not to do this. It's just the test that we go through in like birthing a new version of you, you know. So hopefully that's, let me know if you learned something there. And I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.